I'm Andy Schmuckler. I call myself a man on a mission. Big part of the mission has got to do with saving American democracy from the force of fascism that has arisen over the past 30 years in this country and now is threatening pretty openly to overturn the American system of government with its rule of law and constitution. So I'm giving a lot of thought to what can be done to win this important battle. There are a number of different battles going on, but the election of 2024 for the presidency and for control of the Congress, by the way, uh, that is certainly one of the major battlefields in the larger war about how this society, the United States, is going to move into the future, and even how the whole of human civilization is going to move into the future, where we may very well destroy ourselves. If we got a fascist America, the chances of human civilization ending in self-destruction will be much increased, I'd say. So I give a lot of thought to, well, how do we fight this fight in the political realm? Unlike the greatest generation that had to fight fascism on the battlefields of North Africa and Europe and the South Pacific, we have to fight it in a political arena, which is, we ought to consider ourselves lucky in that respect, because we're not going to be spending a cold night shivering under a blanket with K rations and then end up with moments of terror and a lot of us dead on the battlefield, like happened between 1941 and for Americans in 1945. We've got a battle that's going to be conducted not in terms of how many yards we move the battlefield or how many hills that we take. It's going to be how many votes do Americans cast for democracy and how many will they cast for fascism. It's weighty, but people have endured worse than to have to fight the fight we have to fight between now and November 5th. I find it very stressful to contemplate the possibilities, but compared to my father's generation, I know I've got it easy. So one of the questions that I've got is, how do we reach some of those people who might vote for Trump unless they come to realize what needs to be realized about what the nature of this particular election is, democracy versus fascism? I mean, there are some people in this country who apparently, and I don't know how many of them are, but fascism, the strongman government, the autocracy, the authoritarian regime, those appeal to some people. But I think we can, if that's all we lose in this election, we will have a blowout. I don't know how big it is, but it ain't that big. I'm upset that it's as big as it appears to be. But then there are a variety of people who are not for fascism, but can't see the nature of what's it being on offer. I don't know quite how they don't see it. It's become, I saw it basically, well, I saw the rise of the propagandists like Limbaugh and Gingrich back in the early 90s in Fox News. But I didn't really see the force of fascism as this sort of taking over one of our two major political parties until I saw it in 2004. And then it's become less and less subtle, less and less hidden. I don't know how anybody cannot see it, but I am persuaded that a lot of people don't, that when they tell pollsters they believe this unbelievable thing or they believe that unbelievable thing, that they're sincere. And that, I think a lot of the people who went to the Capitol didn't think that they were being lawless. I think they probably thought that they were restoring the constitutional system because the election had been stolen. I don't really know what proportion were, basically fascistic in their impulse, and what proportion were just in some kind of a strange state where they could be led astray by lies. But there are, after you subtract all those people who can see clearly what's on offer from today's so-called conservative side of American politics, after they're forfeited, I don't see that anybody's going to make inroads into them anytime very soon. I don't know about the long run. I mean, if we've got 20 years, will these people still want? Will they deny that they ever favored fascism in 2020 and 2024? I don't know how it's going to unfold, but for November, there's a chunk of people that we can just disregard. And then there are those people who might vote for Trump and might vote for Republicans, but don't recognize what they're doing is they're voting for essentially the overthrow of the American constitutional democratic system. And that's where the campaign has to be waged. How do you get them to repudiate a fascism that if they saw it, they wouldn't want to support it? And there's the additional step that if you know that your task is definitely to protect American democracy, it's not enough not to vote for Trump. In addition, you can double your impact by voting for Biden. Whatever you may think of him, he is nonetheless the guy who represents the survival of American democracy. Those are the things that I'd like as many Americans as possible to recognize. How do you reach those people who might vote for Trump? Well, I think an important part of it is those Republicans who, for some reason, don't see what's obvious right in front of their eyes, which is why I'm using the phrase crazy Republicans. Because if you're detached from reality, that's sort of the essence of crazy. It's not a technical term. It's not in the diagnostic guide of the clinical psychology or psychiatric field. But crazy is, there's crazy stuff going on. There's a lot of crazy stuff. And then there are a lot of people who are or were Republicans who are not crazy. There are people like, Trump's generals are the military area. His former attorney general, who was so corrupt when he was attorney general up until the very end, when he said, no, there isn't any electoral fraud. The election wasn't stolen. Biden won. Up until then, I mean, he was just the most disgraceful attorney general, I think, in American history, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, he was terrible. But he speaks the truth these days, for whatever reason. Maybe he's trying to whitewash the ignominy of his place in history for the way he dealt with the Mueller report and all that. Anyway, he's there. He's willing to say things. He does say things. There are a variety of politicians. There's Liz Cheney, for example, and Adam Kinzinger. They helped when they were on that January 6th committee. Their presence did a whole lot to establish that this is a truth finding and not a political witch hunt. There are a lot of Republicans. The Bulwark has got a lot of people like Bill Kristol and other people. And there on MSNBC, we've got people like Nicole Wallace and David Jolly, a former congressman from Florida. Michael Steele, the former chairman of the Republican Party. I'm not sure how much clout they would have. Then there's like Judge John something or other Luttig, Luttig, who was the darling of very conservative justices when there was actually a conservative political force in this country that was active. He was their shining light, and he said some very powerful things about the clear and present danger that Donald Trump represents. I don't know how it should be composed, what groups of people holding what kinds of events. But I know that there's a limit to how much they'll listen to any Democrat or liberal, like the way Rush Limbaugh used to say it, liberal, dripping with scorn. I put out every week an op-ed piece that appears in newspapers in the very red congressional district of the Shenandoah Valley, et cetera, where I ran for Congress in 2011 and 12. Most of those are actually geared toward addressing people on the political right. But I know that they've been taught that you can't believe anything that somebody like me might say. I don't know that that means I can't ever get through it all. I keep on giving it my best shot. I occasionally also intersperse with it things about our common humanity. I mean, I wrote something about a high school reunion, which a lot of people on the right seemed to appreciate. They were sort of surprised that a liberal might be a human being. But only so many of them. Mostly I'm challenging to them, and I don't know if I'm doing any good. I apply my craft as best I can. I've got a lot of experience laying things out and saying things in an intelligible way that have facts and reason behind them. But if facts and reason were really any good with these people, I wouldn't have to do this. I mean, if they believe, in spite of all the facts and the reason, that the election was stolen, and apparently the great majority of them still do, what am I going to do in an essay? But I try. I think that Republicans can have more purchase with them. But I've also recognized, since I wrote about this back when W was president, 2001, 2009, that the right wing, the whatever you want to call this thing, the force of fascism has become increasingly visible. That's what it is. The plutocratic force was also somewhat visible. But whatever you call it, I saw how they had made a sort of hermetically sealed, people call it the echo chamber, but I don't know if that metaphor suits my purpose here. What I want to say is I saw how they taught their followers, don't trust anything you hear from, and then there's a whole list of things, liberals, Democrats, journalists, liberal, but the media have a liberal bias. The right has used that so effectively to intimidate the press from telling the clear truth. But anyway, don't believe things that the intellectuals say. Don't believe things that the experts say, whether they be scholars or scientists. Don't believe anything that's said during the W administration from foreign countries. In other words, it's almost like a hypnotic state. Listened only to my voice. It was interesting to see how when W was president, occasionally somebody of some significance who had been really respected and held in high esteem in that Bush world the day before, whenever somebody defects and says to the rest of the Bush world, there's a problem here, they would automatically become, oh, that's not some trusted person who we have some respect for. It was like automatic. It was like a catch-22. You can't hear any criticism because as soon as somebody criticizes the anointed one, whether it be W, who is considered anointed back in the early Iraq war days by a lot of Americans on the right, or whether the anointed one being Trump, who's sort of standing there selling Bibles and representing himself as God's chosen more and more openly. I wonder often about Trump, is how much is he crazy and how much is he just willing to act the way he does because he's got some intuition about how to hook people into backing him. I think that he's a genius at the latter, but I also think that that there really is some craziness going on too. That's what I think. So the people who could talk to these people are up against something like that. As soon as William Barr, say, goes from serving as sort of the sheriff of Nottingham to Trump's Prince John to a speaker of truth, he will become one of the enemy. As soon as the very conservative Liz Cheney went from voting for Trump's proposals 90% of the time, or 91 or whatever it was, and being one of the most conservative members of the House of Representatives by the usual metrics, and being part of a very far to the right family dynasty with Darth Vader, Dick Cheney as her dad, and being number 3 in the House of Representatives in terms of leadership. As soon as she decided that the situation had become such that she had taken an oath that required her to, because she had integrity, to say things and do things having to do with protecting the Constitution. As soon as she did that, the Wyoming Republican Party kicked her out. I mean, there you have it. You can be in a perfectly high status in the Republican world of that day, which was when 2021, after the attempted insurrection. But as soon as you depart from the orthodoxy and the genuflecting for the Der Fuhrer, the chosen one, the Mahdi. I just saw the movie cartoon about the cult leader of Sudan in the 1880s, I think it was. Anyway, there is this phenomenon. You cannot cross. But I think that there are other Republicans, and as many as one can reach is basically the challenge. Not those people who are so far gone into the partisanship that there can enter into it no contrary information, and so that nobody who avoiding not the people who have that instantaneous reaction that if you oppose the anointed one, you are now on the side of the devil. I think there are a lot of such people. And I think that the best people to reach them are the people who have credentials that those people respect. You know, Bernie Sanders isn't going to, well, maybe Bernie Sanders would, but Joe Biden is going to have limits. Most Democrats are probably have no standing because Democrats have been demonized in that world since 1990 anyway. There's a demonization. But even before that, there were Democrats were labeled soft on terror. You know, that guy, Max Cleland, in the 2002 election, the guy who had one limb left because he had left 3 other limbs of his own in Vietnam, defending this country as an American patriot in that war. They made him out to be on the side of Osama bin Laden in the race that they ran against him. The force of fascism has been visible for a while, and they have a way of taking anybody and demonizing him. And there's a whole part of the American body politic that's been trained into accepting demonization of perfectly decent people, of patriots like Max Cleland, of Barack Obama as the Antichrist that 20% of the Republican base believed he was, even though he's one of the most decent guys that we've ever had in the Oval Office. There's a problem there, but not everybody's that far out. And so we need to have these sane Republicans get up and speak as effectively and powerfully as they can and reach as many people as they can to see that this election is about whether American democracy will survive or whether that constitutional regime that's been the source of so many of our blessings as Americans will be displaced and overturned by a force of fascism. And that in this particular battle, one of the major questions is who's going to be wielding the powers of the presidency? Someone who's on the side of democracy, and that's Joe Biden's, or someone who's telling us quite openly he's going to run a fascistic regime. Whatever people think about Joe Biden, and I think there's going to be a lot of Republicans who have trouble voting for Joe Biden because he's been demonized. They don't recognize the fundamental truth that Lindsey Graham said about him, but when he had no reason not to, which was he's one of the best people God ever made. I mean, he's just, a really decent human being, as politicians go in particular, but I don't actually think that politicians are worse than other people, and not from my experience in the political world. He's a guy who would have been happier in a world of cooperation and bringing out the best in each other. That's not the world in which he gets to serve as president. And whatever people think of him, though, even if they think he's as bad as the Republicans have taught them to think he is, they talk about, we got to save the American Republic. From what? I mean, from what? What has Biden done that hasn't been, well within the bounds of mainstream thinking in any kind of intelligent, decent society? Nothing. I mean, I think he's made a major mistake in the handling of this Gaza thing. That's not the issue about saving the American Republic. So I think that there's actually two stages here for the Republicans, sane Republicans. One is to just help them see what Trump is and what the Trump party is. The reasons why these guys at the Bulwark are now, and Liz Cheney are allied with Jamie Raskin in the basic fight that we're engaged in. And then secondarily, if you can get them, say, by Labor Day to recognize that they got to oppose Trump because he represents the end of the values that they really hold dear, and I think 2/3 of the American people want democracy. Then from Labor Day to Election Day, take that idea, this is what Trump is, and draw the obvious conclusions. You got to vote for Joe Biden. If you got to hold your nose and do it, okay, hold your nose and do it. But do it. That's the way you come through. We're fighting fascism here. The greatest generation had to fight fascism on Iwo Jima and landing on Normandy and all the rest of that. A lot of them died. So you can hold your nose and vote for a Democrat. You can vote for Joe Biden. You got the choices that you got, and when you see what this election's about, it's obvious what you got to do. That's what I'd like to see, a two-stage thing, as many Republicans talking to as many Republicans as effectively as possible. Those are my thoughts on that subject. Hope you'll tune in. I don't know if I'm going to be making any more videos today. I'll think about whether there's more I got to say. But I'll be back on Saturday morning, and one of the things I may talk about then is that it's become very difficult in the public sphere to talk about matters of male and female, men and women. I think you know what I'm talking about. I don't like to see my side of this current divided society. I don't like to see that kind of division. But given what's happened on the political right, I really want to see the good guys not do anything crazy either. And there are a couple of areas where we're not doing ourselves credit. And I've encountered them a couple times, as I see it, when I've tried to talk about some issues that touch upon matters of male, female, assigned at birth, woman with a uterus. No. A person with a uterus, a pregnant person. Not everything there is as sound as I'd like for our side to be. We are the good guys when it comes to democracy versus fascism, doing something about climate change, not doing something about climate change, being for racial harmony and goodwill versus exacerbating the hostilities and exploitations between the races. All those things, we're on the right side. I don't like to see us undercut our basic solidity by taking liberation into an area where what is good about liberation goes into what is something more extreme than liberation. Maybe it wasn't smart for me to give so much of a preview, but that's a topic I want to address. It's not prudent for me to talk about that, and that's essentially my topic. I think will be it's not prudent in today's whatever to talk about things like male and female. Okay, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.